Hello, I'm Sarah Collins. Let's get straight to the numbers because while the headlines for 2026 are focusing on a raise, your bank account is likely telling a different story. Every October, the Social Security Administration releases a number that millions of Americans wait for with bated breath: the Cost of Living Adjustment, or COLA. For 2026, the announcement might feel like a win on paper, but for the American homeowner, the person who has spent 30 years paying down a mortgage and building a life, that number is increasingly a mathematical illusion. You felt it at the kitchen table. The official inflation rate says one thing, but your property tax assessment just came back with a double-digit hike. Your supplemental healthcare premiums jumped. The bag of groceries that cost $60 3 years ago is now flirting with $100.
This isn't just bad luck or a rough patch in the economy. This is a structural disconnect. The COLA is designed to keep you from falling behind, but because of how it's calculated, it's actually acting as a slow-motion wealth leak. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of the 2026 numbers. We're going to look at why the government uses a math formula designed for 25-year-old blue-collar workers to determine the lifestyle of a 65-year-old retiree. By the end of this deep dive, you won't just see the trap, you'll have the map to navigate around it. To understand the 2026 trap, we have to look at the engine under the hood of Social Security. Since 1975, COLAs have been based on the CPI-W, the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. Pause and think about that demographic. Urban wage earners. These are people currently in the workforce. Their spending habits are dominated by things like commuting costs, professional attire, and technology. But if you're an investor or a homeowner over 50, your inflation looks nothing like a 24-year-old's. Since 1982, healthcare costs have outpaced the general CPI by an average of 2 to 1. When the CPI-W says inflation is 3%, but your medical out-of-pocket expenses are rising at 6%, you aren't breaking even. You are losing purchasing power every single year. Between 1980 and 2026, this wealth leak has compounded. If the government used the CPI-E, the index for the elderly, which weights healthcare and housing more heavily, the average benefit would be significantly higher today. Estimates suggest a permanent 0.5% to 1.2% annual gap between the COLA you get and the inflation you actually live. In 2026, we are seeing a unique geopolitical pressure on the CPI-W. While energy prices have stabilized somewhat, service sector inflation, things like home repairs, insurance, and long-term care, has become sticky. The CPI-W is slow to reflect these because it prioritizes goods over services. If you own a home, you know that maintenance inflation is real. Finding a plumber or a roofer in 2026 costs significantly more than it did just a few years ago. Yet, in the CPI-W basket, these essential homeowner costs are diluted by the falling price of televisions or imported textiles. You can't eat a flat-screen TV, and you can't use it to fix a leaking roof. This is where the illusion becomes a snare. Most people think of their COLA as a raise. In reality, for many middle-class families, it is a taxation trigger. We need to talk about provisional income. In 1983, Congress passed a law that made Social Security benefits taxable if your income exceeded certain thresholds. Here is the kicker. Those thresholds have never been adjusted for inflation. For individuals, it's $25,000. For married couples filing jointly, it's $32,000. In 1983, $32,000 was a comfortable middle-class income. In 2026, it is barely above the poverty line in many states. Every time you get a COLA raise, it pushes your total income closer to or further past these frozen limits. This creates what experts call the tax torpedo. As your COLA pushes you over the $32,000 mark for a couple, up to 50% of your benefits become taxable. Cross the next threshold of $44,000, and up to 85% become taxable. You get a 3% COLA increase, but that increase pushes you into a higher bracket where the IRS takes back a significant portion of the total benefit value. You aren't just treading water, the tide is pulling you further out to sea. This is the hidden clawback that the 2026 headlines won't mention. As a geopolitical analyst, I have to remind you, your kitchen table is connected to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and the ports of Shanghai. The US dollar has seen extreme volatility leading into 2026. While a strong dollar sounds good, it impacts the American consumer in complex ways. Most of the goods that middle-class Americans buy from electronics to the components of our automobiles, are imported. If the dollar weakens relative to our trading partners, the cost of living rises instantly at the port. The COLA, which is backward-looking because it calculates what happened last year, cannot keep up with a sudden currency-driven spike in prices. Historically, since the end of the gold standard in 1971, the purchasing power of the dollar has declined by over 85%. For someone who started their career in 1980 and is looking at 2026 as a pivotal year for their portfolio, this means that even with COLAs, your 2026 dollar buys a fraction of what your 1980 dollar did. The global shift toward de-dollarization in certain trade blocs also means that the U.S. may no longer be able to export its inflation to the rest of the world. This means higher prices stay here, on your table, while your COLA is still stuck in the urban wage earner math of the previous decade. So, how do we fight a mathematical illusion? We stop playing the game by their rules. We focus on expense hardening. First, look at I-bonds and TIPS. These are treasury assets specifically designed to track inflation. Unlike the COLA, these are direct hedges. Second, consider dividend-growth ladders. Focus on companies that have raised dividends every year for 25 years or more. They provide a private COLA that often outpaces the CPI-W. Third, prioritize expense hardening. This is the most overlooked strategy. Invest in your home's efficiency now. Solar, high-grade insulation, and modern heat pumps are a hedge against utility inflation, a category that has historically spiked 3 times faster than the COLA. Finally, practice active tax bracket management. Work with a professional to keep your provisional income below the taxation triggers. This might mean pulling from a Roth IRA instead of a traditional 401k to avoid the tax torpedo. The 2026 COLA isn't a gift, it's a data point. And in this world, data is either a tool you use or a trap you fall into. My mission here at Insight with Sarah is simple. I want to give you the geopolitical and economic map you need to protect your kitchen table. If you found this analysis helpful, please subscribe and share this with someone who is counting on that 2026 adjustment. The more we understand the math, the less we have to fear the headlines. I'm Sarah Collins. Keep mapping the world, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.